social problem that I find to be very important is mass incarceration. The United States has the highest incarceration rate of any country in the world. Every year, millions of people cycle in and out of jails, prisons, juvenile, and immigration detention centers as they fall victim to the United States criminal justice system. Mass incarceration disproportionately affects minorities and contributes to the cycle of oppression faced by communities, families, and individuals. One example of this exists in the state of Wisconsin. Wisconsin has the highest African American incarceration rate out of every state in the nation. According to the Wisconsin Examiner, one out of every 36 African Americans residing in the state of Wisconsin is confined to a state prison. Mass incarceration targets vulnerable populations, contributing to traumatic experiences that may lead to psychological and physical harm. A period of incarceration also leads individuals to experience social, financial, and legal disadvantages that contribute to re-entry into the criminal justice system. Over the past 40 years, the incarceration rate in the United States has increased over 500%. Along with a high rate of incarceration, the United States also faces the problem of recidivism, with over 50% of offenders reincarcerated upon release. One structural factor that contributes to mass incarceration is lack of education. Studies show that there is a correlation between education and incarceration. According to the United States Sentencing Commission, 42% of individuals sentenced in federal cases only held a high school diploma, while 28% never graduated high school. Individuals that drop out of high school are 63% more likely to be incarcerated than those with a bachelor's degree. Approximately half of the youth of color that enter the juvenile justice system have attained an educational level that is below the grade equivalent to their age. This means that there is a significant correlation between academic failure and involvement in the juvenile justice system. Another structural factor is lack of health care. Approximately half of the people in United States jails and over 1/3 of the population of U.S. prisons have been diagnosed with a mental illness. Mental illness complicates an already difficult path for prisoners. Another structural factor is bias policing. Since law enforcement's origin, the burden of policing has fallen on communities of color and impoverished communities. Bias policing and a lack of law enforcement accountability are responsible for incarceration disproportionately affecting poor communities, urban communities, and communities of color. One economic factor is the monetization of private prisons. This incentivizes filling prisons to maximum capacity so that individuals, corporations, and politicians can make a profit. Political factors, such as tough on crime policies and the war on drugs, also contribute to mass incarceration by incentivizing filling prisons to capacity and disproportionately targeting urban communities, communities of color, and poor communities. Conflict theory suggests that structures and institutions are designed to maintain the status quo and preserve the existing distribution of power. According to conflict theory, the criminal justice system is a tool that has been weaponized to maintain power dynamics and control. The marginalization of groups of people, economic inequality, and systemic racism all contribute to high rates of incarceration. Conflict theory suggests that corporations and politicians profit from the growth of the prison industrial complex. Conflict theory also suggests that racial bias is ingrained into the United States criminal justice system and is responsible for laws that disproportionately affect underprivileged groups. Mass incarceration has resulted in overcrowding of facilities. The influx of new prisoners, coupled with a shortage of staff, has resulted in correctional staff resorting to extreme forms of discipline, prolonged isolation of prisoners, physical harm, and a lack of mental health care. As a result of deteriorated and overcrowded conditions, prisoners have suffered extreme psychological effects, health concerns, and physical harm. By criminalizing drugs like marijuana and cocaine, the government, along with law enforcement agencies, are able to terrorize communities, destroy families, and traumatize individuals. As stated in the documentary 13th, urban communities were basically steamrolled by the United States government and law enforcement. Historically, these tough on crime policies have been responsible for taking large chunks of black men from their families for long periods of time. This results in less income for urban and black communities, less income for families, and less support for spouses and children. Companies, politicians, and individuals make money off the privatization of prisons and are incentivized to fill them to full capacity. In 1987, there were 3,122 inmates confined to private prisons. By the year 2001, there were 123,000 individuals confined to private prisons. This is a nearly 4,000% increase. If the United States government was to abolish the privatization of prisons, it would decrease the incentive to fill jails and prisons to full capacity. Because companies and individuals make a profit from the privatization of prisons, there is a lack of incentive to end the privatization of prisons, creating a barrier to this proposed policy. Another proposed policy is increasing access to education. The higher education an individual receives, the less likely they are to come in contact with the criminal justice system. For this reason, the United States should incentivize individuals to participate in higher education. One barrier to increasing access to education is the increased cost of higher education. Another proposed policy is universal health care. Increasing access to health care reduces crime. Individuals with mental health issues that are unable to access health care are more likely to end up incarcerated. One barrier to increasing access to health care and having a universal health care system is the cost, and the fact that there are many individuals within the U.S. who do not agree with a universal health care system. In conclusion, mass incarceration affects individuals, families, and communities. Poor communities and communities of colors are disproportionately affected by mass incarceration. To reduce the incarcerated population in the U.S., the government must begin to invest more money in education than they do on confinement, abolish private prisons, increase access to health care, address systemic racism, and end tough on crime policies that disproportionately harm poor communities and communities of color. Working to end mass incarceration will improve the social, political, and economic factors for communities all over the nation and improve the health and quality of life of individuals that are negatively impacted by the current criminal justice system in the United States.